Okay, let's be honest. How many of us have left our dogs on a start line before a run, walked out, and heard the timers beep behind us, all while watching our dog run past us into an off-course tunnel? I know I've been there. My goal today with this video is to help you build a confident start line stay that you can trust and that your dog can happily hold for you. I'm just a dog girl, and this is how I train my dogs to stay on the start line.
I always start my start line training in a low distraction environment. Luckily for me, the living room is low enough distraction for Perk. However, some dogs need for you to bring them in the bathroom or a guest bedroom. When I start teaching my start line stay, I start by teaching the dog the criteria of what I am looking for. For Perk, I want her to sit in position and hold that position until I release her. What I am doing is when she sits and she holds it, and as you can see, it's a very short period of time, I click and reinforce her for that. Perk is very impulsive, so she's offering a lot of different behaviors. However, none of those behaviors get reinforced. What she learns is she learns that the sit is where she gets reinforcement. Once I have established criteria for my dog, I will go ahead and start adding some motion. Perk has already done start line stays, so I was able to move through the steps rather quickly. However, you can see that when I add motion, she is definitely tempted to move. All I do is put her back in the position that I ask her to be in, and then go back to working the exercise. It is important to make note that my payments for her stay come very rapidly. I reinforce heavily and fast. I don't have her stay for too long of a period of time, and I always make sure to pay heavily for the behavior. Because of how well Perk was doing with my small movements, I've now decided to add some more movement. This is good for helping to proof her stay. Can you imagine leading out on a start line and having to walk a straight, perfect line without sneezing, scratching, or accidentally stepping in a hole? Me neither. Obviously, I'm not going to lead out jumping up and down, but it's a good proofing exercise to proof her to motion. So I'm adding some jumping, and as you can see, that's very difficult for her. So all I do is put her back where I ask her to stay and reinforce. As you can see, the jumping was too much for her and took her back a step. Luckily, I caught onto this quickly and was able to reinforce her for staying and then build back up to jumping. This is a really good example of a dog not understanding criteria and being pushed too far. As a trainer, it is my responsibility to catch on to these things and then be able to work through them with my dog. If I push the dog too far and do not reinforce them for correct behavior, I will lose everything that I have worked towards. It's better to go back a step than to push forward too quickly and lose everything you've worked for, as well as lose the dog's confidence in you. What I am working on with Perk now is something more similar to a normal lead out. I'm leading out, pausing, and going back and reinforcing her in position. Obviously, she messed up. I put her back in position, didn't pay her, asked her to stay, let out again, and went back and reinforced her for her stay. I need to make sure that I work this on both sides of my body, and as you will see in a couple of seconds, I lead out with her on my right, and it's too much for her. I've been doing all of these exercises with her on my left, which has been unfair. So now I have to proof her on my right as well. As I work this exercise, you can also hear that I am using words that are not her release words, such as yes, good, and awesome. This is to proof her stay and to show her that she needs to stay there until I release her. I will not do this exercise with a low drive dog or a dog that does not like to come out of their stay. However, with a dog like Perk, who is impulsive, I can use this to help proof her stay and make her think about what she is doing. Another great exercise to practice in your low distraction environment is adding your arm to your lead out. We typically raise our arm before we release the dog, so the dogs start learning to release on the motion of the arm raise. I will lead out, put myself in position, raise my arm, take a deep breath in, and go back and reinforce my dog. I want to always remember that I want my dog to release out of their stay with a verbal and not with my motion. So I try to prove all kinds of motion and everything that they will see on a lead out. Good girl, Perk, and thank you for your help. When I bring this behavior into the agility ring, it is important that I keep consistent with the training that I have done in my low distraction environment. So as you see, I'm bringing the same exercises out here as I did in the living room. Now I am using a different dog because he wanted a turn today. So this is my Australian Shepherd, Bane. And what I'm doing with him is I'm doing a lot of those same exercises that Perk and I worked. I'm walking away, I'm bringing my arm up, I'm adding motion to it, and then I'm going back and reinforcing him for staying for me. Earlier in this video, I mentioned that dogs aren't necessarily really good at generalizing. So what I make sure to do is I work him around the clock of the jump. So those of you who have done agility have probably heard about around the clock, and I did an abbreviated version of this for the video, but I make sure that he can stay at that jump no matter where I set him. So he is staying at the jump straight on. He is staying at the jump from, we'll say 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock. I want to make sure that dog really understands what I am asking when I lead out on a jump.
Obama, Oprah, ostrich, Opal, okay, yay!
So as you can see, I used a lot of different words that are not his release word on my lead out. That helps test my word and test my stay to make sure my dog chooses to stay.
Ollie, ollie, oxen free. Oba, orange, okay, yay! Super smart. Very good. Very nice.
So the exercise that I am setting up right now with Bane is one of my favorite stay exercises. And I didn't do a very good job of filming this, so I step out of the frame, and I am sorry for that. But what I do is I step behind the dog, and then I move up and past the dog with motion. I can build onto this with more motion. I can build onto this with running with a squeaky toy or a regular toy, but it works with the dog not releasing on motion no matter what my motion is. So you'll see I'm going a little bit faster in this one, up and past, and he has to stay in position. I'm going back and reinforcing him in position during this exercise because staying in position is obviously what I want him to do. The next sequence of exercises that I have set up work on reinforcing the dog for the start line stay. So the first exercise that I'm going to demonstrate is I'm going to leave him in a stay and release him to side to get reinforced. This reinforces the release. It, however, does not necessarily reinforce the stay for the dog. The second exercise that I'm going to set up is I'm going to leave him in a start line stay, I'm going to lead out, and then I am going to go back and pay him in position for the stay. I find that this is the most common way that people reinforce the dog's stay. The third exercise is I'm going to lead out, and when I release him, I am going to throw his toy behind him so he gets reinforced behind him. What I find is dogs always get reinforced by going forward on an agility course. Reinforcing the dog behind them actually puts value in staying because they don't know if they're going to get released forwards or backwards. It's important to work your dog at all obstacles that can be start line obstacles. Tunnels and tires tend to be their own behaviors, and the dogs need to see both to be confident on the start line. When I'm practicing my start lines, I don't always just start at the front of the building. Sometimes I will ask for a start line stay in the middle of the ring. It's also important to have the dog do start line stays facing away from and towards the crowd. Sometimes you will have a course that starts by going towards the crowd and then back into the center of the ring. Good luck from all of us, and Perk wants you to remember, happy dogs are a must.